You're looking at the third video clip on the CANs, completing the CANs, and this is the domain of planned, permanent caregiver strengths and needs. Clarifying what this domain is about, we do not rate caregivers in foster care. We rate the child's legal guardian for children who are not in foster care. And if the child is in a foster care placement, we rate the identified parent, other relative, adoptive parent, or caretaker who is planning to assume the custody of the child. First item, supervision. In 0, the caregiver has good monitoring and discipline skills. In 1, provides adequate supervision, may need occasional help or technical assistance. In 2, scoring for action taking, reports difficulties monitoring or disciplining the child and needs assistance to improve the supervision skills. And in 3, the child is at risk of harm due to the absence of supervision because the caregiver is unable to monitor or discipline the child and requires immediate and continuing assistance. Involvement with care has to do with how well the caretaker is involved in planning or implementing services and how able is the caretaker to act as an advocate. So in 0, no difficulties in that respect. In 1, there may be a history of seeking help, but the caregiver is open to receiving support, education, information. In 2, the caregiver does not wish to participate in services or intervention. And in 3, the caregiver wishes for the child to be removed from their care or is not visiting the child in residential care, i.e. Los Prietos or juvenile hall. Knowledge. This has to do with the knowledge of the needs and strengths of the child. In 0, knowledgeable about that. In 1, generally knowledgeable but may require additional information to improve capacity to parent. In 2, clear need for information to improve how knowledgeable they are about the child, and that lack of information is interfering with the ability to parent. And in 3, the problems with knowledge places the child at risk of significant negative outcomes. Organization, next item. Organization refers to how well the caregiver organizes himself or herself. In 0, well-organized, efficient. In 1, minimal difficulties, organizing and maintaining the household to support needed services. For example, may be forgetful about appointments or occasionally fails to return case manager or probation officer's calls. In 2, caregiver has moderate difficulties organizing and maintaining household to support needed services. So you see the goal in understanding how organized they are is the support of the needed services for the child. And in 3, the caregiver is unable to organize the household to support needed services. The next item is social resources, and it has to do with a network of the family, but in function of vis-a-vis helping raise the child. In 0, significant social network actively helping raising the child. In 1, some family or social network that actively help. In 2, there is family or social network that may be able to help, but they don't do it. And in 3, there is no family or social network that may be able to help with raising the child. The next one is residential stability, very straightforward. In 0, stable housing for the foreseeable future. In 1, caregiver has relatively stable housing, but either has moved in the past 3 months or there are indications of housing problems that might force them to move in the next 3 months. So this is an ambiguous item, right? Because we keep saying that you rate the highest level for the past 30 days, but you see that item 1 asks you about the past 3 months and future 3 months. So keep that in mind. In 2, caregiver has moved multiple times in the past year. Housing is unstable, again, beyond the past 30 days. And in 3, caregiver has experienced periods of homelessness in the past 6 months, again, beyond the past 30 days. Now, the next 3 items, which are physical health, mental health, and substance abuse, follow the same criteria, and you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to do the next 3 together. In 0, generally healthy, no mental health needs, no substance use needs, right? In 1, in recovery for medical physical problems or from mental health difficulties or from substance abuse difficulties or substance use difficulties. In 3, the medical needs or the mental health needs or the substance use needs or substance use difficulties interfere with their capacity to parent. And in 3, the caregiver has medical physical problems or mental health difficulties or substance use difficulties that make it impossible for them to parent at this time. So you can see the criteria is the same for the 3 items. Now we move to developmental. It's developmental about the parent, and the developmental needs are always in function of the child, right? So 0, caregiver, no developmental needs. 1 has developmental challenges, but they don't interfere with parenting. 2, developmental challenges that do interfere with the capacity to parent. And 3, the developmental challenges are such that it make it impossible for the parent to parent at this time. Accessibility to childcare services is just that. Parents have to have access to childcare services, and this is an assumption of the developer of the CANs. In 0, sufficient access. In 1, limited access. Needs are met minimally, but they meet the needs by the available services that they have. And in 2, the caregiver has limited access or access to limited childcare services, and the current services do not meet the caregiver's needs. If the caregiver has these very long schedules and they need childcare for the long working hours, they're not meeting that need. And in 3, the caregiver has no access at all whatsoever to childcare services. Family stress. The family stress has to do with the stress or that the parent feels to manage the child's needs. So in 0, caregiver able to manage the stress of the child's needs. In 1, the caregiver has some problems managing the stress of the child's needs, and it's child or children, right? In 2, caregiver has notable problems managing the stress of the children, and this interferes with their capacity to give care. And in 3, inability. Caregiver is unable to manage the stress associated with the child or children's needs, and this stress prevents the caregiver from parenting. So you see that all of the items, the focus of the items is on parenting or the child's needs, on the functioning of the household in the function of the child services. Okay. Self-care daily living. This is interesting because this rating describes the caregiver's ability to provide for the basic needs such as shelter, food, safety, and clothing of their child. So it's not how well the parent or caregiver takes care of themselves, but how well the parent or caregiver provides for the basic needs of their child, right? Shelter, food, safety, and clothing. In 0, daily living skills needed for the care of the child are all there. In 1, the caregiver needs verbal prompting to complete the daily living skills required to care for the child. But with verbal prompting, they do. So it's a little bit concerning. You never know if they're doing it or not, really. In 2, the caregiver needs assistance, like physical prompting, to complete the daily living skills required to care for the child. And in 3, the caregiver is unable to complete the daily living skills required to care for the child, and that requires immediate intervention. By the way, 3s are always immediate or intensive intervention. Employment. It's an interesting item. It has to do with the performance of the caregiver in school or work setting. So it's called employment/educational functioning. So in the CANS form, it says employment, but when you score it, you need to remember that it's employment/educational functioning. It can include issues of behavior, attendance, or achievement, or productivity. So in 0, caregiver is gainfully employed or in school, right, towards gaining skills for employment. In 1, there's a mild degree of problems with school or work functioning. The caregiver may the caregiver may have some problems in work environment and may need to be monitored, right, and assessed further. In 2, there's a moderate degree of school or work problems and or difficulties with learning. So remember, the educational piece is important here. The caregiver may have a history of frequent job loss or maybe recently unemployed. So this does not necessarily match the 30-day window, okay? Continuing in 2, the caregiver needs an intervention to address employment or learning difficulties. And in 3, there's a severe degree of school or work problems. The caregiver is chronically unemployed and not attending any education program. The caregiver needs immediate intervention. So see that the purpose of this item is to see, are they gainfully employed or are they doing something to be gainfully employed in the future, and are there issues in that respect? The next one is education. So remember, the criteria is completely different from the above. It's quite interesting because the education is education attainment, and it raised the degree to which the individual has completed his or her planned education. Okay, so there was a plan, did they complete it? In 0, the caregiver has achieved all educational goals or has none, but the educational attainment has no impact on their lifetime vocational functioning. All right, so they never really intended to go to school, but they nevertheless have an ongoing gainful employment. In 1, the caregiver has set educational goals and is currently making progress towards achieving them. In 2, they have educational goals, but they are not making any progress towards achieving them. And in 3, they have no educational, and that lack of educational attainment is interfering with their vocational functioning, right? So they need a vocational or educational intervention. So you see how this is also in function of their capacity to be gainfully employed. All right. The next section is legal. 0, no known legal difficulties, no known legal difficulties. 1, history of legal problems but currently not involved with the legal system. So again, although it says 30 days, you need to look at the history, all right? So 30 days is ambivalent here. 2, caregiver has some legal problems and is currently involved in the legal system. And 3, serious current or pending legal difficulties that place the caregiver at risk for incarceration, needs immediate, comprehensive, and community-based interventions. Financial resources, very straightforward. 0, sufficient financial resources to raise the child. 1, some financial resources that actively help with raising the child. 2, limited financial resources that may be able to help with raising the child. You know, those we don't really know if they have enough money, right? And 3, caregiver has no financial resources to help with raising the child, and the caregiver needs financial resources. The transportation item reflects the caregiver's ability to provide transportation for the child. In 0, no transportation needs, caregiver is able to get the child to appointments, school activities, school and or other activities consistently. In 0 and 1, the child and their caregiver have occasional transportation needs. The caregiver has difficulty getting the child to appointments, school activities, but this happens less than once a week. In 2, the child and the caregiver have frequent transportation needs, difficulties getting the child to appointments, to school, to activities, and this happens regularly, all right? It is once a week or more. And the caregiver needs assistance transporting the child and access to transportation resources. And in 3, they have no access to appropriate transportation, unable to get the child to appointments, school activities, or other, etc., and they need immediate intervention and development of transportation resources. And lastly, the last item of this domain is safety. And this is interesting. It's about the child being at risk from others. In 0, the household is safe, secure, child is at no risk from others. In 1, the household is safe, but there are concerns about the safety of the child due to history of others in the neighborhood that might be abusive, right? In 2, the child is in some danger from 1 or more individuals with access to the household. And in 3, the child is in immediate danger from 1 or more individuals with unsupervised access. So I just want to review one. Household is safe, but concerns exist about the safety of the child due to history, right? So past 30 days, again, in this item is ambiguous because there may be a history, all right, of people going into the house and threatening the safety of the child. Or there may be others in the neighborhood that might be abusive. So it's preventative, watchful eye, right? So with safety, we have concluded the last item on the domain of planned permanency caregiver strengths and needs.